Hi friends, welcome back. Let's learn the new topic today, that is Abstract Window Toolkit, or say AWT, which is the GUI model or building GUI applications in Java. It was introduced in Java 1.0. We have better model for this also, like Java Swing, but this is the starting point from where we'll start writing GUI applications. So we should be working on this very well and then switch to Java Swing applications. Okay, let's start. Here are some points about the WT that we should learn. It's a set of classes for GUI development, as I just said before, and provided since Java 1.0. And such classes are categorized in three categories. One is containers, then components, then helper classes. Containers, something like just your opening. I'll just show you these things. What is containers? Just see the names. Containers are used to hold the components. It could be like frame, it could be a dialog, it could be a panel, it could be window, it could be applets. There are the 5 containers provided in AWT. What is frame? What is dialog? You can have an idea. Just start an application, say Notepad. This is basically frame. This is simply frame where we can maximize it, restore it, minimize it, something like that. So this is basically a kind of frame. If you go inside of you can have the menu, you can have your title bar and other thing. You can status bar. Then go to the file. If you just say save as, just see this, the 3 dots, this indicates it's called ellipsis. If you click on this, you get a dialog. This is a dialog. Dialog is only cross, no minimize, no maximize. And this always comes as part of frame. So this is child of frame, basically you can say. This is again a container, but this is child container. Now if you see this whole part divided into 3 sections, 1, 2, 3, and this the upper part also. Every part is known as panel. So we can divide the whole container into parts, and each part is called a panel. So like that we can have these containers. So frame is the main container, they are the subcontainers. And this is again a separate container used for the websites called applets, Java applets. So this is again a container, but will be discussed later. This out of this current topic. So we will discuss these ones. And then come the components. Components are used to interact with the user, like label, button. We click on the button, we input some text from the text box, user ID, password or something. So we can have the text area, multi-line text box. This is a multi-line. This is for drop-down list. This is a selection list. We can create checkbox and radio buttons. So these are some of the components that just interact with us. So that we call components. There are certain classes which are not directly visible to us, but they help your frame and button, etc. They're all containers and the components. They're called helper classes. So helper classes are used to help the containers and the components. That could be like color. You want to apply some color, some font. You want to set the dimension of certain control or something like that. So, but these classes are working in the background. They are supporting these containers and the components. See this. This is the hierarchy of the classes. All components and the containers are inherited from an abstract class that's called component class. This is a top level class for all these components. And all the containers are inherited from container class. So this is a whole hierarchy. Top level class is your object. Then we can have the component and then all these components. Then you want to create a panel. Panel comes like this. Panel is a container because this comes from component. So object, then component, then container, then panel. So panel has all the properties of all these classes. Similar way, the frame, we talk about the frame, then it's object, then component, then container, then window, then frame. So frame has this unique properties and all these properties of these classes. Something like this. The dialog is same, then this comes applets. So this is hierarchy that these classes manage into the system using object-oriented programming model. Now here are some common methods of the component class. There comes what the common methods of component class. So there are certain points, like suppose you want to set the location of some component, set the size of the components. You can combine both the things together, the set bounds, where we can define the starting location also, as well dimension also. Then we can set the font, we can set background, we can set foreground. Then we can enable it. Sometimes you see the button, you try to click on button, that button won't work. So that is because this is disabled. So you can enable or disable any button or any other control. That's your choice. When something you create that generally comes on the screen, comes in your memory, you want to show on the screen, you can say set visible true or false. Even you can hide certain control on your screen anytime whenever you want that. So that goes set visible. So all these are very common functions And there is lot many other functions. This is the major list of functions which are directly generally used. And let's learn with so many other functions later on as well. Now containers class provide common method for all the containers. Like we want to add certain component on the container. Then when we add the component inside the container, their placement should be controlled. So that is known as layout manager. So we have the very special classes called layout managers that control the placement of the controls inside the containers. So that goes set layout. Suppose you want to remove certain component from this container, you can do that also. Remove all component, that you can do that also. So there are certain layout manager we're talking about. So layout manager are the helper classes that control the placement of components inside the container. So AWT provide 5 layout managers: border layout, flow layout, grid layout, grid back layout, and card layout. You learn about that, what is the role of these managers. So we just go ahead and with the demo we can see all this. But before that, you must be knowing how to create all these components. So let's take an example. We start from label component. The label component, the label class is used to place some text on the container. This constructor is like label. We can have the blank constructor or default constructor. Then we can have parameterized constructor where we can define some text. And then we can, if you suppose you are not given some text, you want to change the text, you can do that text. Or you want to fetch the text, you can do that also. So this is, suppose you want to create single line text box. This class's name is text field. Then this is text field. This is basic constructor, default constructor. Then we can define the number of columns. Number of columns something like, suppose you want to input say your pin code. That is pin code is for 6 character long. And you say mobile is 10 character long. So you can define the column size of 6 and 10 for that. You can type more data as well, and you can limit the data. This is your choice. Suppose you want to put some text yourself into text box, you can do that also. You can fetch the text from there. Suppose you are using this text for the password purpose, then you need to define which character to be shown while typing the characters, so that the actual characters should not be shown in the password box. So you can define that set echo char is the function to define such character. Then comes your button. The button class is to create the push buttons. These buttons actually, when we click on such button, they just give the kind of push. So we generally call the push buttons. So we can create a function. We can write some label on that like OK, cancel, save, delete. There are all the labels. So we can change the label later also. That's up to us how we're going to operate. Then comes your frame class. I told you frame is the main class that comes as a window for your applications. So we can define the title of this here also. We can define the title later also. Even we can set the resizability of frames. If suppose we don't want somebody to allow the resizing of our frame, that we can control that also. So these are basic 4 things that we just to start with, and later we'll discuss something more. Now take one demo. So here we are taking create a GUI application. The demo here is create a GUI application having a frame of 300 by 300 size with the title as login form, having 2 labels. These are the labels, and then 2 text boxes. There are the 2 text boxes and 2 buttons. These are buttons. Here is very important thing. The point is, while creating all these things, we need to define these variable names. Like suppose T1, T2. Sometimes people say B1, B2, T1, T2, L1, L2. But if we have the bigger forms tomorrow, we have the 20 forms, 30 controls or 40 controls. You want to be able to recognize what is T1, what is T27, what is T37. So for that, we have one conventional model called Hungarian notation by which you can understand all these things. So here is, I have mentioned some note for you. While creating such components, they must have proper names to interact with them. Developers generally use Hungarian notation to define the proper name. So we need to understand what is Hungarian notation. Here is the Hungarian notation. So the notation given by Charles Simoni of Hungary, because there's a scientist, Mr. Charles Simoni, he is from Hungary. So this is around 30 years back that the concept was given. Concept says, we should use 3 character prefix to define the type of component along with the purpose of the component. So that should be user friendly. Here we use camel case. Camel case we use first character should start with lowercase. Any new words get added, then that the first character should be made capital. The system is known as camel case system, or define the component. Take this example. LBL, this is label, 3 character long prefix, and user ID says this is for user ID. This is a label for user ID. If we say txt user ID, that is indicating this is a text box or for user ID. LBL password, this is a label for password. Textbox for the password. BTN login, this is button for login. This button for sign up. So these names are very good indicators by which we can easily identify these controls. Now let us take a real example by which we can understand some demo we can start with. So we are starting our software that's called IntelliJ. See the live demo, how we can create all these things. So this is our first demo, demo 1. So let's start the new project. Suppose we're starting a new project. Suppose we are taking Java 16 version. Next, type some name. So here say first demo or something, whatever name you want to give. Then select your location and the project name. Just say OK. Your screen is going to be ready. Your project is going to be ready. Now just say right click on SRC, new, select the Java class. And here we are taking demo number 1. So it's just, we can say names demo 1. Just see your class is ready. Now we can start writing your code. This is package is AWT, so we need to import java.awt here and import all the classes. So we can just, second thing, we are going to create a frame, so we need to extend with frame. Now you can define all the things that you require here. Suppose I'm saying label, say LBL user ID that we just learned, say LBL password. If I say text field, txt user ID, then txt password, then if I say button, btn for login, btn for register. So I have defined 6 controls, 6 component names, but still I have not created. These are simply the variable names, nothing. We have not created instances. Now we need to create instances. If I say public demo 1, that is my constructor. Then here if I say, now I can say LBL user ID equals to new label. That is user ID I'm writing. Then LBL password equals to new password, new label. And here we can define the password. Then comes your txt user ID equals to new text box. Suppose we define the size of say 10 or say 20. Txt password, again I'm saying new text box, 20 column size. And this is the password, so we need to set the echo char as well. So I'm putting star, and last 2 things are btn login equals to new button. We are saying login, btn pass register equals to new button, and here is register. Now your all 6 components are created. Now we can add into the container, like say add LBL user ID. In front of that we have to add the text box, txt user ID, add LBL password. Then we can add txt password. Then we can add the buttons like btn login, btn register. So all 6 component has been added. Now define the title, say set title. I'm saying login form, that will ask in the problem statement. Then we can say set size. Size was defined 300 by 300. So your size will be defined like this. Now say set visible true. So your window that was created in memory, that will come to the screen. Now say public static void main. Your main is created. Now say new demo 1. So your whole process that done. Your code is ready. Now simply right click, run the code. Compiled, it's done. But see this now. It is showing on the last control here that we just set whenever we add the components inside the container, the placement, how they get placed inside the container, that matters. So by default, this layout is called border layout. And border layout, the screen is divided into 5 sections: east, west, north, south, and center. And by default takes center. So that's why the last button is going to display it. How we can do that? So we'll understand this concept later on. And second thing is, this form will not be closed till now here. So we have to go that run and close it. I will discuss with you how we can close it later. But the point is how we can see all these controls. So we can define certain layout. I have given certain names: border layout, flow layout, if you remember those names. So if I change this layout just for this particular form, then we'll discuss later, but to showcase all these controls, we are defining this. So function was set layout. If I say new flow layout, so we are setting the layout manager as flow layout. Flow is left to right, top to bottom, something. So if I show you all these records, something like this. So I'm trying to run it again. Now see this. All your components are visible, but I said they are left to right, top to bottom. So just see this. If you have space in the right side, they will have the right side. If you have the last space, they will come down. So that is the actual visibility that we thought of. So this is the text box. We can write user ID. This is the password. And later on, we can work on these controls as well. This is how to design. This is only a design. This is not a function. But these controls are getting GUI application. So this is your frame. These are all your components. There are 6 components, 2 other labels, 2 other text boxes, 2 other buttons. So I think you got the problem statement and how we have solved this problem. And thank you everyone to have this. Try to do the practice on this, how we can do all these things. And next session we'll continue further about the border layout, what exactly border layout, flow layout, grid layout we'll discuss in next section. Thanks everyone.